This is CNN Breaking News.
We do have breaking news, and it is sad news to share with you at this moment. Former First Lady Barbara Bush has died. She was 92 years old. The First Lady was being cared for at her home in Houston. According to the Bush family office, the First Lady had been suffering for some time. She'd been in and out of the hospital multiple times, battling with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and congestive heart failure. The First Lady and her husband, former President George H.W. Bush, had been married for 73 years. CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel joins me live on the phone. Jamie, we're going to be able to remember more of Barbara Bush here in these next few moments. You had the chance to speak to her many, many times. This was a moment she had chosen to have happen this way. She wanted to be at home.
That's absolutely true. You know, many people were familiar that her husband was struggling with his health because of Parkinson's, and we've seen him in the wheelchair. But not so many people knew that for the past 2 years, she had struggled with COPD and with congestive heart failure. Then this past weekend, she had been in the hospital multiple times, but she decided she did not want to go back in, that she was at peace and she was going to do this on her terms in the very elegant and forceful way that Barbara Bush would. So the family made the announcement, and I am told that she was at home. Her husband was with her. Her family had been in and out visiting, but that this morning she really started to fade and that she went into a coma early this morning, and that they knew that the end was coming this evening, Aaron.
And of course, that end has come. They have announced that Barbara Bush has passed. Jamie, stay with me. I want to give everyone a chance to remember her right now, and Wolf Blitzer has taken a look back at Barbara Bush's life.
America loves Barbara Bush.
Barbara Bush was the woman behind 2 U.S. presidents, the wife of one, the mother of another. Barbara Pierce was born in Queens, New York on June 8, 1925. She grew up in suburban New York. At a Connecticut country club dance, she met a young man who would change her life, George Herbert Walker Bush.
I was square all through high school. I just tried to do the best I could. I married the first man I ever kissed. You talk about a bore. I am the world's worst.
George Bush focused on building an oil business. Barbara Bush focused on building a family. George Bush eventually entered a life of public service, and while Barbara's candor might not have made a good match for his job as CIA director,
That's because I can't keep a secret.
her charm was a definite asset to her husband's political career.
Find the joy in life, because as Ferris Bueller said on his day off, life moves pretty fast, and you don't stop and look around once in a while, you're going to miss it.
George Bush served 2 terms in Congress, and in 1980 was elected as Ronald Reagan's vice president. 8 years later, he sat in the Oval Office. Barbara Bush loved living in the White House, keeping diaries of her time there and using them to help write her memoirs. 2 other books showed her lighter side and a dog's eye view of the executive mansion.
I must tell you.
Mrs. Bush knew well her vision of a First Lady's role.
I think the person who has the courage to run for the office is the one you should hear, not the wife or the husband. Having said that, of course I told George how I felt.
For George and Barbara, their more than 60 years together included decades of devotion. This letter to her, written by George while he was serving in World War II.
I love you, precious, with all my heart, and to know that you love me means my life. How often I have thought about the immeasurable joy that will be ours someday. How lucky our children will be to have a mother like you.
I give you 2 of those children, George W. and Jeb, would solidify the Bush political dynasty as president and Florida governor. But in a surprising comment in 2013, as talk of a presidential run by Jeb swirled, the matriarch told NBC's Today Show there should be a limit on the family's White House claim.
There are other people out there that are very qualified, and we've had enough Bushes.
But after Jeb did decide to run for the 2016 Republican nomination, she fully backed him and hit the campaign trail.
He's decent and honest. He's everything we need in a president.
In or out of politics, the legacy Barbara Bush nurtured will live on through her family, children, and grandchildren.
I know that I'm the world's luckiest woman. I think if I sort of put it in a nutshell, these are the things that are important to me: faith, family, and friends.
Author of First Women, Kate Brower, joins me on the phone. Jeff Zeleny is also with me, along with Mark Preston, and Jamie Gangel is back. Kate, you had a chance to speak to Barbara Bush. Obviously, you have covered the First Ladies, and she was a very vibrant and very vocal, very strong First Lady.
She was. I mean, I think she was one of the happiest First Ladies, and I talked to her about the resident staff actually at the White House, and the butlers and maids at the White House, and they all said that Barbara Bush was their favorite First Lady to serve. She was like a grandmother to the staff. I mean, very sweet, very funny. She had a great sense of humor, had this kind of biting wit, and she was really beloved. And it's very sad because she was the matriarch of the Republican Party, not just the Bush, sprawling Bush family.
And Jeff Zeleny, she was, even as she was battling this illness, which, of course, as Jamie points out, we were not as well aware of. Of course, everyone was aware of George H.W. Bush and his suffering from Parkinson's and related complications, but not as much about her. She even managed, as you were covering this election, to get out on the campaign trail for Jeb.
She did, and that is something that, I mean, boy, she is someone who, you know, if America had a royal family system, she would be the queen mom of America and politics, certainly, and American life, Aaron. I mean, I do remember when she was campaigning for George W. Bush, of course, back in those early days when he was running for governor of Texas, but then running for president as well. She did not think that that son would become president. She thought that Jeb Bush, who she regarded as perhaps the smarter of the two sons, would be president. But boy, was she proud of President Bush, the son, certainly proud of Florida Governor Jeb Bush. But as Wolf was saying in the obituary there, that story of her life, did not think that it was a moment for more Bushes in politics. So she was very against the Jeb Bush run. We know that she had a view of this president, that was not necessarily positive. She largely kept that to herself in her later years, but she certainly kept active and engaged in politics. And we are told there will be a statement coming shortly from the White House, of course, on the passing of Mrs. Bush. Aaron.
And Mark, you know, she had spoken, I think, in ways that captured all of us. But if anyone doesn't remember, some of the times she spoke about her unique position as you know, being the wife of a president, and also, of course, the mother of a president. Here she is with Larry King. This is back in 2005. I want to play it.
What's it like, Barbara, to be the mother of a president?
Well, it's worrisome because you worry about the responsibilities. Having said that, it's not very much different from the other children. We were in Washington last week, and I got there before George, and Laura was overseas, and it really touched me. The president came out and met me at the door. I would feel the same way if Doro stopped work or Marvin stopped work and came out of the building. I really loved it. But it's not that much different, do you think? Except
Does
the
he
huge
call home?
Lots.
Calls mom.
But to see calls mom and dad to see how we're feeling. Is it cold up there? Or tells us what he's going to do. We ask, what you going to do today? Or was it hard going to?
Checks in early in the morning, and no agenda, doesn't want anything, or doesn't. He knows what he's got to do, and he goes out and does it. But family means a lot to him. You ask what it's like. It's about family, Larry. It's not about the big deal or the head table or all that stuff. It's about a father and mother and a son. And then you show me pictures of your kids, I could whip out pictures of mine. I mean, that's what it's about. And it's hard for people to realize that. But we've been there. and loved every minute of trying to serve. And we take great pride in our boys that are in politics, but it's exactly the same for the others.
Can you honestly say, and it's hard, that you love every child equally?
Absolutely.
That Marvin is as important to you as George?
Absolutely.
And Neil is as important as Jeb, and
Yes,
the
and
daughter
Doro.
is as important.
Absolutely.
Dora's as
No question.
And
I
what's
think
more,
they
they
know that,
all
too.
love each other, which makes it, I mean, they're very loyal. If George gets hurt, Marvin hurts. If Marvin gets hurt, Doro hurts. And all the way down the line, they're very loyal, loving. And maybe that's what politics does for you, draws you either apart or together. In our case, it drew us together, I think.
Poignant ending there, Mark. You know, and I think part of what captures in that exchange, not just the warmth that they had for each other, but also just the talking about, you know, their son. Yeah, he calls home. He gets up in the morning and calls home. Of course, that son was George W. Bush, who at the time was president of the United States.
Yeah, no doubt. And just like, let's take a step back and think about her role that she played for in the United States. She was a supporting spouse. She had 6 children. Her husband, served a couple of terms in Congress, 12 years in the White House. Her son does 8 years in the White House. Her other son is the governor of Florida. That is an incredible amount of pressure and stress that you can put on anyone, let alone one mother. But yet she did it with grace. And I do think that when we look back as historians now are going to look back on her life, they're going to look at Barbara Bush and say that she certainly was the prime example, if not nearly the prime example, of the perfect spouse partner that a president could have in the White House. And I think we saw that with her.
And I want to share with our viewers a statement we are just getting tonight from the Bush spokesman, Jim McGrath. He says, a former First Lady of the United States of America and relentless proponent of family literacy, Barbara Pierce Bush, passed away Tuesday, April 17th, 2018, at the age of 92. She is survived by her husband of 73 years, President George H.W. Bush, 5 children and their spouses, 17 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, and her brother, Scott Pierce. She was preceded in death by her second child, Pauline Robin Bush, and her siblings, Martha Rafferty and James R. Pierce. The official funeral schedule will be announced as soon as is practical. We now have a statement that has just come into CNN from the former President George W. Bush, who has just issued a statement about his mother, saying, "My dear mother has passed on at age 92. Laura, Barbara, Jenna, and I are sad, but our souls are settled because we know hers was. Barbara Bush was a fabulous First Lady and a woman unlike any other who brought levity, love, and literacy to millions. To us, she was so much more. Mom kept us on our toes and kept us laughing until the end. I'm a lucky man that Barbara Bush was my mother. Our family will miss her dearly, and we thank you all for your prayers and good wishes." Very eloquently and beautifully written, Jeff, by the former president.
Certainly, the words there from President Bush are now being echoed on social media from her grandchildren as well. George P. Bush, of course, the land commissioner in the state of Texas, he is also paying his respects online and social media, which of course shows how she really did span the test of time. He's saying, "My grandmother didn't just live life, she lived it well. And the sorrow of her loss is softened by the knowledge of her impact on her family and her country. I will miss you." So clearly, Barbara Bush really is unparalleled in American history, as we've been talking about. Of course, be a wife to a president, but so much more than that. Her wisdom certainly will be missed.
And I want to share something. She did an interview, a solo interview. This is actually in 1994, but she talks about her wonderful life and how lucky she feels. Let me play for you, Barbara Bush.
Well, because I always knew that I was lucky and that life had been good to me, but I really remembered again how really good it had been.
Because some people, when they face the catharsis of a book, and in order for a book to be successful, it has to be honest, have a difficult time letting it out.
I loved writing the book. And let me just give you an example. I told George this on the phone this morning or last night before I went to bed, he called. I awakened Monday morning in New York City, having said goodbye to George Bush, and I looked and the airplane went into the White House, and a lot of things happened. The Pope Arafat met with Rabin. A lot of things happened. And I sat and watched the news. Darling Jessica Tandy died, and Hume Cronin. I thought about Cronin, and I thought, you know, I knew every single person or place that was on that television set thanks to George Bush, with the exception of Arafat, and George did meet him this year, but every other person knew me and I knew them.
Quite a life.
That's an amazing life. I knew it from writing the book, but I told George, I said, it really struck me how really great a life you've given me.
But also from looking at the book, aspects of it Barbara Bush didn't like.
Of course. Nobody likes a child to die or losing an election. Nobody likes, you know, the ugly parts of politics.
Did you like the public life?
Sure.
You did?
I love people. I really loved living in the White House, but I don't miss it at all. I miss
Explain
the people.
that.
Well, I miss the people.
Don't you miss what you love?
No. No, because I got more. We're having the best time you've ever known.
You're such an optimist. Former FBI senior intelligence officer Phil Mudd joins me. And of course, Phil, George H.W. Bush at one time was director of the CIA. They were a beloved couple there as well. And her comment, I love people.
A beloved couple, let me offer you a simple message. For everybody who sees this as a dark moment, for every young person who never experienced the Bushes, let me tell you for just 20 seconds what I witnessed from my friends who dealt with that family and with her and her husband at the CIA. If you think there is no light at the end of the tunnel in terms of courtesy, gentility, kindness, if you want to research somebody who will give you hope that this America is a great country, look at Barbara Bush. That's all you need to do.
Beautifully said. And thanks so much to all of you. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And our breaking news coverage continues now with Anderson.